The last line of defense. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of Lunar Base Alpha, her reflection ghosting against the reinforced glass as she watched Earth's remaining defense fleet conduct their drills. The planet below, once a vibrant blue marble, now bore the scars of the Kraxan Empire's initial assault. Vast swathes of scorched land visible even from orbit. 3 months had passed since humanity's first contact with the alien empire, and those months had taught them harsh lessons about their place in the galaxy. The Kraxan warships had appeared without warning, their crystalline vessels refracting sunlight like massive diamonds in the sky. They demanded Earth's immediate surrender, claiming it as their newest protectorate. Humanity's response had been predictably defiant, and equally predictably devastating. The Kraxan's energy weapons had carved through Earth's most advanced military installations like paper. "Commander," Lieutenant Rivera's voice crackled through her comm unit. "The civilian retrofit program is complete. We have 50 cargo haulers ready for weapons installation." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The Kraxan had expected humanity to fight with warships. They hadn't counted on humans converting every available vessel, from mining rigs to cargo haulers, into implements of war. "Excellent work, Lieutenant. Begin the installations immediately. I want those ships combat-ready within 48 hours." The door to the observation deck slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Dr. Amit Patel, head of Earth's Combined Sciences Division, entered with his characteristic nervous energy. "Commander Chen, we've made a breakthrough with the shield analysis." Sarah turned from the viewport, her attention immediately focused. Dr. Patel had been studying debris from destroyed Kraxan vessels since the invasion began. "Tell me." "Their shields," Amit began, pulling up a holographic display from his tablet. "They're not actually energy barriers like we initially thought. They're more like predictive deflection systems. The crystals in their hull structure use quantum entanglement to predict incoming attacks and generate counterforces exactly where they're needed, which explains their near-perfect defense against conventional weapons." Sarah nodded, her tactical mind already racing ahead. "But every prediction system has limitations." "Exactly." Amit's eyes lit up. "The system can only account for threats it can accurately predict. And we found something in their battle logs. Their shields have a microsecond delay when dealing with multiple simultaneous attacks from random vectors." Sarah stepped closer to the holographic display, studying the data scrolling past. "How many simultaneous attacks are we talking about?" "Our simulations suggest that with enough random strike points, say 1,000 or more, we could overwhelm their prediction systems completely." Amit paused, his excitement tempered by practicality. "The problem is, we don't have enough warships left to launch that kind of coordinated attack." Sarah's smile returned, sharper this time. "No, but we do have something better." She gestured to the fleet of modified civilian ships outside. "We have chaos." The next 12 hours saw Sarah and her command staff developing what they would call Operation Firefly. The plan was audacious, possibly suicidal, but it played to humanity's greatest strengths: adaptability and unpredictability. The converted cargo ships would be loaded with thousands of small, independently guided drones, each barely larger than a coffee cup. These drones, originally designed for space debris cleanup, would be reprogrammed to execute random attack patterns against Kraxan vessels. The randomness was key. Without set patterns, the Kraxan's predictive shields would be forced to work harder, creating opportunities for larger weapons to punch through. "This is insane," Colonel Weizong commented during the final briefing, though his tone suggested admiration rather than criticism. "We're basically going to throw thousands of angry bees at them and hope their shield gets tired of swatting." "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones," Sarah replied, reviewing the deployment schedule. "The Kraxan expect us to think like a military force. They expect formation attacks, strategic strikes, predictable human behavior. We're going to show them just how unpredictable humans can be." As she dismissed her officers to their preparations, Sarah returned to the viewport. Somewhere out there, The Kraxan fleet was gathering for what they believed would be their final push to subjugate Earth. They saw humans as primitives, barely worth the effort to conquer. Their arrogance would be their undoing. Sarah touched her hand to the cool glass, looking down at the scared but unconquered planet below. "You want to see what humanity is capable of," she whispered to the distant stars. "We're about to show you." The next morning, as Earth's combined fleet prepared for what could be their last stand, Sarah addressed her forces from the command center of Lunar Base Alpha. Her voice carried across all frequencies, reaching every ship, every station, every soldier and civilian volunteer who had stepped forward to defend their home. "Today, we fight not just for our survival, but for our right to exist as we are. The Kraxan believe they are superior because of their advanced technology. They think this makes us weak, primitive, easily conquered. But humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology. It's our spirit, our creativity, our absolute refusal to accept defeat. Today, we show them what that spirit can do." As she finished speaking, the first reports of Kraxan ships entering the solar system began to arrive. The enemy fleet was massive, their crystalline ships catching the sun's light like a river of diamonds flowing through space. They had come to end the war. Sarah Chen took her position at the command station, her voice steady as she gave the order that would begin humanity's most daring gambit. "Operation Firefly is now active. All ships, execute random deployment patterns. Show them what chaos really looks like." The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, and for the first time since the invasion started, Sarah felt something she hadn't dared to feel before: hope. Operation Ghost Strike. Flight Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez watched from the cockpit of his converted mining vessel as thousands of drones scattered into space like a swarm of metallic fireflies. The massive Kraxan fleet approached with the same methodical precision they'd shown since the invasion began, their crystalline ships arranged in perfect geometric formations. They were beautiful in their way, and completely unprepared for what was coming. "Ghost Squadron, sound off," Marcus called over the secure channel. One by one, his ragtag fleet of retrofitted civilian ships responded. There was Elena piloting the converted ore hauler, Ahmed in his repurposed maintenance tug, and 15 others, each vessel as ungainly and irregular as his own. They were the opposite of the Kraxan's sleek warships, and that was exactly the point. "Remember," Marcus transmitted, "we're not trying to be heroes here. Our job is to be the biggest, most annoying distraction these crystal lovers have ever seen. Keep your patterns random, keep moving, and don't give their targeting systems anything predictable to lock onto." The first wave of drones reached the Kraxan fleet's outer perimeter. On Marcus's tactical display, thousands of tiny dots swarmed around the enemy vessels like angry insects. The Kraxan's response was immediate, their predictive shields flaring to life with brilliant purple energy as they attempted to swat away the miniature attackers. "Look at that," Elena's voice came through with a hint of satisfaction. "Their shields are working overtime. Time to add to their problems." Marcus grinned. "Ghost Squadron, initiate Phase 2. Random vectors, maximum chaos. Show them what these junkers can do." His ship shuddered as he pushed the modified engines beyond their intended limits. The mining vessel's original cutting lasers, designed to slice through asteroids, had been upgraded with oscillating frequencies. They wouldn't do much damage to a Kraxan warship, but they didn't need to. They just needed to keep the enemy's shields busy. The squadron split apart, each ship taking a different approach vector. Marcus watched as Ahmed's tug executed a series of spiraling maneuvers that would have made a fighter pilot sick, its industrial grappling arms now equipped with electromagnetic pulse generators. Elena's ore hauler released clouds of metallic chaff, creating zones of sensor interference that forced the Kraxan ships to rely on visual targeting. "Their formation is starting to break," Marcus observed as the enemy fleet began to respond to the multiple threats. The perfect geometric patterns were dissolving as individual ships turned to engage the irritating human vessels, and their cloud of drones. They can't maintain their firing solutions if they can't predict where we'll be. A massive Kraxan cruiser turned its attention to Marcus's ship, its weapon ports glowing with gathered energy. He responded by triggering his vessel's special modification. Emergency tanks filled with mining waste erupted from the hull, spreading a cloud of radioactive debris in his wake. The Kraxan's predictive shields, designed to stop energy weapons and solid projectiles, struggled to account for the spreading cloud of contaminated particles. Commander Chen, Marcus reported, Ghost Squadron is successfully engaging the enemy fleet. Their formations are compromised, and their shield systems are showing signs of strain. Ready for Phase 3. Sarah's voice came back clear and confident. Excellent work, Ghost Squadron. Keep them distracted. Primary Strike Force is moving into position. The battle continued to evolve into something that defied conventional military doctrine. The converted human ships darted between the Kraxan vessels like mosquitoes harassing elephants, their improvised weapons and tactics preventing the alien fleet from organizing an effective response. The drones, meanwhile, had become an ever-present threat, forcing the enemy's shields to maintain constant coverage, rather than focusing power where it was needed most. First shield failure detected. Elena's excited voice cut through the tactical chatter. One of the smaller Kraxan ships had momentarily lost its protective field, its crystalline hull now bearing scorch marks from multiple drone impacts. Marcus watched as more reports of shield fluctuations came in. The Kraxan's supposedly impenetrable defense system was being overwhelmed, not by superior firepower, but by the sheer chaos of the human attack. Their perfectly predicted battle had descended into randomness, and their technology wasn't designed to handle it. Ghost Squadron. Sarah's voice returned. You've done your job. The enemy fleet is sufficiently disrupted. Clear the area immediately. Primary Strike Force, you have a go. Marcus relayed the order to his squadron, and the converted civilian ships began their withdrawal, still maintaining their erratic movement patterns. Through his viewport, he saw the real warships of Earth's fleet emerging from hiding, their weapons primed and ready to strike at the Kraxan's now vulnerable vessels. As his ship cleared the engagement zone, Marcus allowed himself a moment of pride. The Kraxan had expected to face a primitive military force. Instead, they'd encountered humanity's greatest weapons: improvisation, adaptability, and the stubborn refusal to fight according to anyone else's rules. Ghost Squadron, form up on my position, he ordered, watching as the main battle was about to begin. We're not done yet. Commander Chen might need another dose of chaos before this is over. Behind him, Earth's warships engaged the disrupted Kraxan fleet, their weapons finding purchase where before they'd been useless. The battle for humanity's survival was far from over, but for the first time, the aliens were learning what it truly meant to face a species that had turned unpredictability into an art form. The Achilles Protocol. Dr. Amit Patel's laboratory aboard Lunar Base Alpha had transformed from a research facility into a war room. Holographic displays showed the ongoing battle in real time, with particular focus on a Kraxan ship's shield fluctuations. His team worked frantically, analyzing the data streaming in from Ghost Squadron's attack. There, Amit pointed to a particular sequence of shield failures. The pattern isn't random. They're quantum predictive systems. They're cascading. He turned to Commander Chen, who had joined him in the lab. Every time their shields fail, it's following a mathematical progression. Sarah studied the data, her expression intense. Can we use this? Better. Amit's fingers flew across his console. We can force it. The Kraxan's entire defense system is built on quantum probability calculations, but they made a crucial mistake. They assumed all probabilities could be calculated. A holographic display shifted, showing the internal structure of a Kraxan crystal ship. Their shield generators are synchronized through quantum entanglement. It's brilliant engineering, but it has a fundamental flaw. Force enough quantum uncertainty into the system, and the whole network collapses, Sarah finished, understanding dawning in her eyes. How do we do it? Amit smiled. the expression of a scientist who had found the solution to an impossible problem. We already have the tools. Those maintenance drones we converted, they're not just hitting the shields randomly. They're creating quantum interference patterns. Every impact introduces more uncertainty into their calculations. He brought up another display, this one showing the drone swarm's attack patterns. If we can coordinate the drones to hit specific points in the right sequence, we can trigger a cascade failure across their entire fleet. Their own quantum entanglement network will work against them, spreading the shield failure from ship to ship. Sarah's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. How many drones would we need? More than we have, Amit admitted. But he paused, bringing up schematics for the converted civilian ships. The mining lasers on the Ghost Squadron ships, we can modify them to create the same quantum interference effect. Combined with the drones, it might be enough. Sarah was already reaching for her comm unit. Lieutenant Rodriguez, bring Ghost Squadron back to base immediately. We need to make some adjustments to your equipment. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Ghost Squadron's ships were quickly retrofitted with quantum interference generators, devices hastily constructed from modified mining equipment and spare parts. Dr. Patel's team worked nonstop, programming the precise attack sequences needed to trigger the cascade failure. Marcus Rodriguez stood with his squadron leaders in the briefing room, studying the new attack patterns they would need to execute. These maneuvers are incredibly precise, he observed. One wrong move, and the interference pattern fails. That's why we're not going to execute them precisely, Sarah replied, surprising everyone. The Kraxen's quantum calculations are based on prediction. If we're too perfect in our attack, they'll adapt. We need to maintain an element of chaos, controlled chaos, but chaos nonetheless. She turned to Dr. Patel. Can you program some randomness into the interference patterns while maintaining the overall effect? Amit nodded slowly, understanding. Yes, that could actually work better. Multiple paths to the same mathematical conclusion. It would make the cascade failure even harder for them to predict and prevent. As the modifications were completed and the plan finalized, Sarah addressed the combined forces one last time. What we're about to attempt has never been done before. We're going to use the Kraxen's own technology against them, turning their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. But more than that, we're going to show them something they've never understood. That perfection isn't always the path to victory. The fleet launched, Ghost Squadron once again taking the lead. The Kraxen forces, still struggling to maintain formation against the drone swarm, didn't immediately recognize the new threat. Their crystalline ships gleamed in the starlight, their shields shimming with energy as they continued to swat at the countless small attackers. Marcus's voice came over the comm. Ghost Squadron, initiate a kills protocol. Remember, perfect imperfection. Make it look messy, but hit your marks. The converted civilian ships moved into position, their modified mining lasers creating invisible patterns of quantum interference. Combined with the precisely imprecise attacks of the drone swarm, they began to weave a web of uncertainty around the Kraxen fleet. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then, almost imperceptibly, the shield harmonics of the nearest Kraxen ship began to fluctuate. The fluctuations spread, jumping from ship to ship through their quantum entanglement network. What started as a subtle disturbance quickly grew into a cascade of failing shields. It's working. Amit's voice was filled with wonder as he watched the data streams. The quantum uncertainty is propagating through their entire network. Their predictive systems are trying to compensate, but they can't calculate their way out of true randomness. Sarah watched as the mighty Kraxen fleet began to lose its impenetrable defense. Ship after ship experienced shield failures, their crystal hulls now vulnerable to conventional weapons. But she knew this was just the beginning. The real fight was about to start, and humanity would need every advantage they had just gained. All ships, she commanded, prepare for primary engagement. The Kraxen are about to learn that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't perfection, it's chaos. Thunder in the dark. The void between Earth and Luna erupted with fire as humanity launched its counterattack. With the Kraxen's quantum shield network compromised, Commander Sarah Chen gave the order that would change the course of the war. All combat vessels, engage at will. Show them what Earth's fleet can really do. The human warships, which had been holding back during Ghost Squadron's operation, now surged forward. Leading the charge was the EFS Thunderchild, Earth's newest battlecruiser, commanded by Captain Diana Wells. The ship had been waiting in the shadow of the moon, its weapons primed and crew ready. Multiple Kraxen vessels showing shield instability, Diana's tactical officer reported. Their formations are breaking down completely. Diana allowed herself a tight smile. Target their command ship. All batteries, fire when ready. The Thunderchild's main gun spoke, sending lances of plasma through space. Where once such attacks would have dissipated harmlessly against quantum shields, now they struck true. The Kraxen command ship's crystalline hull cracked under the assault, spreading fractures sparkling in the sunlight. Throughout the battlefield, the scene repeated itself. Human warships, no longer facing impenetrable defenses, pressed their advantage. The Kraxen fleet, accustomed to relying on their superior technology, found themselves in unfamiliar territory, actually having to fight. From his position with Ghost Squadron, Marcus watched in awe as the battle unfolded. "Never thought I'd see the day," he muttered, before keying his comm. "Ghost Squadron, maintain interference patterns. Don't let them stabilize those shields." The converted civilian ships continued their dance through space, their modified mining lasers sustaining the quantum disruption that kept the Kraxen vulnerable. The drone swarm, now coordinated by Dr. Patel's algorithms, created ever-shifting patterns of chaos that prevented the alien ships from re-establishing their defensive network. Back in Lunar Base Alpha, Sarah monitored the battle's progress. The Kraxen were adapting, as she knew they would, but their responses were becoming increasingly erratic. Their perfect formations had dissolved into individual units fighting for survival, each ship trying to compensate for their failing shields in different ways. "Commander," Amit called from his station, "they're attempting to reconfigure their quantum network. They're trying to isolate sections to prevent the cascade failure from spreading further." Sarah nodded. "Just as we expected. Signal the fleet. Execute Phase 2. Across the battlefield, human ships began to implement new attack patterns. Instead of concentrating fire on individual targets, they spread their attacks across multiple Kraxen vessels, maintaining the quantum interference while pressing their tactical advantage. The Thunderchild led a squadron of destroyers in a daring maneuver. Cutting through the heart of the Kraxen fleet, Captain Wells stood at her command station, calling out orders as her ships executed a complex series of attacks designed to prevent the enemy from regrouping. "They're falling back," Diana reported to command. "Their attempts to reform their shield network are failing. We've got them." But victory wouldn't come easily. A group of Kraxen ships, abandoning their usual tactics, suddenly accelerated toward Earth. Their crystalline hulls glowed with accumulated energy. They meant to make a suicide run against the planet. "All ships, new priority target." Sarah's voice cut through the comm channels. "Do not let them reach atmosphere. Ghost Squadron, full interference pattern on those ships now." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Ghost Squadron, form up on me. We're going to give them something new to calculate." The civilian ships moved with surprising agility, taking up positions around the charging Kraxen vessels. Instead of maintaining their previous interference patterns, they began generating seemingly random quantum disruptions, forcing the alien ships' partially functioning shields to try to adapt to multiple contradictory threats. The effect was immediate. The Kraxen ships' acceleration faltered as their systems struggled to compensate. In that moment of vulnerability, the Thunderchild and her destroyer squadron struck. Their combined firepower tore through the weakened crystal hulls, transforming the suicide run into spectacular explosions that lit up space. "Threat neutralized," Diana reported, her voice steady despite the intensity of the moment. "But we got more problems." The remaining Kraxan ships are regrouping near the L4 point. Sarah studied the tactical display, noting how the enemy fleet was attempting to establish a new defensive position. They were learning, adapting to humanity's tactics, but they were still thinking like Kraxan, still trying to find the perfect solution to an imperfect situation. Dr. Patel, she called, how long until they could potentially stabilize their shield network? Amit's fingers flew over his console as he ran calculations. Even if they managed to isolate and reconfigure their quantum systems, it would take at least 20 minutes to establish a stable field. They don't have 20 minutes, Sarah decided. All ships, prepare for final engagement. Ghost Squadron, coordinate with the Thunderchild. Captain Wells, you have tactical command of this phase. Diana's voice came back strong and clear. Understood, Commander. All ships, battle formation Delta. Ghost Squadron, take up flanking positions. We're going to show the Kraxan that humanity doesn't need perfect technology to win a war. We just need the will to fight. The human fleet moved as one, warships and converted civilian vessels alike, advancing on the regrouping Kraxan forces. This would be the decisive moment, the point where humanity would prove that innovation, adaptability, and controlled chaos could triumph over even the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Dawn of Defiance. The final battle for Earth's freedom unfolded against the backdrop of stars. The remaining Kraxan ships, their crystalline hulls reflecting the distant sun, had abandoned their usual precise formations. They fought now with a desperation that proved they had finally learned to fear their supposedly primitive opponents. Commander Sarah Chen watched from Lunar Base Alpha as Captain Diana Wells coordinated the combined fleet's attack. The Thunderchild led the charge, its weapons blazing paths through space, while Ghost Squadron maintained their quantum interference patterns with devastating effect. Multiple Kraxan vessels attempting to establish a new quantum network configuration. Dr. Amit Patel reported, his eyes fixed on the sensor readings. They're trying something different, bypassing their standard protocols entirely. Sarah leaned forward, studying the tactical display. They're learning, finally starting to think like us, abandoning their reliance on perfect prediction. She keyed her comm. All ships, be advised. Enemy adaptation in progress. Prepare for unexpected tactics. The warning came just in time. The Kraxan fleet suddenly split into smaller groups, each adopting different strategies. Some maintained their traditional defense patterns, while others began mimicking the chaotic movements of Ghost Squadron. Well, would you look at that? Marcus Rodriguez's voice carried a note of pride. They're trying to beat us at our own game. Ghost Squadron, show them who the real masters of chaos are. The converted civilian ships responded with impossible maneuvers, their retrofitted engines pushing far beyond safety limits. They wove between the Kraxan groups, their quantum interference generators creating overlapping patterns that confused both defensive systems and sensor arrays. Aboard the Thunderchild, Diana Wells watched her tactical display shift and change as the battle evolved. They're adapting faster than expected, she transmitted to command. But they're still thinking too linearly. Formation Delta 7. Let's show them what real unpredictability looks like. Earth's warships broke into seemingly random groups, each executing different attack patterns. Some pressed direct assaults, while others held back, creating the impression of confusion or hesitation. The Kraxan, attempting to predict and counter these movements, found themselves repeatedly caught off guard. Commander, Amit's voice carried an urgent tone. I'm detecting massive energy buildups in the largest Kraxan vessels. They're attempting something unprecedented. Before Sarah could respond, space itself seemed to ripple. The remaining Kraxan ships had synchronized their crystal matrices, creating a massive quantum field that began to expand outward. The effect was immediate. Human sensors scrambled, communications distorted. They're trying to create a macro-scale quantum disruption, Emmett explained rapidly. If they succeed, they could disable our entire fleet at once. Sarah's mind raced. The Kraxan had finally abandoned their reliance on predictability, but they were still thinking too big, too coordinated. Dr. Patel, if they're linking all their systems together, then they're more vulnerable than ever to cascade failures. Amit finished, already understanding. But we'd need to hit them with something massive, something they couldn't possibly predict or defend against. Sarah opened a channel to all ships. Ghost Squadron, move to fallback positions. Captain Wells, prepare the fleet for immediate withdrawal. She paused, allowing tension to build. Lieutenant Rodriguez, execute Protocol Omega. Marcus's response was immediate. Copy that. Commander. Ghost Squadron, dump your reactor cores on my mark. The civilian ships, their makeshift weapons nearly depleted, turned as if to retreat. The Kraxan quantum field continued to expand, its crystalline resonance threatening to overwhelm human systems. At that moment, Ghost Squadron executed their final act of chaos. Every converted civilian ship simultaneously ejected their reactor cores, not as weapons, but as quantum noise generators. The radioactive material, combined with the quantum interference patterns they had been generating, created a cascading wave of pure uncertainty that slammed into the Kraxan's synchronized field. The effect was catastrophic. The alien ship's attempt to create a massive quantum disruption backfired spectacularly as their own field amplified the chaos introduced by the reactor cores. Their synchronized crystal matrices shattered, sending waves of destructive energy rippling through their fleet. All ships, strike now, Diana commanded. The Thunderchild and her escorts surged forward, their weapons finding targets among the disarrayed and vulnerable Kraxan vessels. Ship after ship succumbed to the combined assault, their once impervious crystal hulls breaking apart in the void. From his damaged but intact mining vessel, Marcus watched as the mighty Kraxan fleet began to crumble. Sometimes, he transmitted, the best way to win isn't with superior technology. It's with superior imagination. The remaining Kraxan ships, their quantum network destroyed and their forces in disarray, began to retreat. Their withdrawal was not the orderly departure of a tactical repositioning, but the chaotic flight of a force that had finally encountered something they couldn't predict or control. Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of Lunar Base Alpha, watching as the last Kraxan ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel. Behind her, the combined human fleet, warships and civilian vessels alike, formed up in victory formation, their hulls bearing the scars of battle but their crews unbowed. Send word to Earth, she ordered. The Kraxan Empire has been defeated, not by superior technology or overwhelming force, but by humanity's greatest weapons: creativity, adaptability, and the courage to embrace chaos when facing impossible odds. Dr. Patel joined her at the viewport, his tablet showing the final battle analysis. They'll be back, you know. They'll learn from this, adapt their strategies. Sarah smiled. Good. And when they return, they'll find that humanity has continued to evolve, continued to innovate. We'll have new surprises waiting for them. As the fleet began their return to Earth, the story of humanity's victory spread across the planet. It would become a testament to their species' greatest strengths, not the ability to build the most advanced technology, but the wisdom to know that true superiority lies in the willingness to think differently, to adapt, and to never surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. The dawn of a new era had begun, and humanity had proven that in a galaxy of rigid perfection, their beautiful chaos would always find a way to prevail.